Affinity Photo has a unique layer type called a pattern layer, which allows you to easily create repeating patterns. You can use it for various purposes, but it's very useful within an image editing context for quickly adding seamless textures and patterns to diagrams or illustrations. Let's start with a basic example. I have a blank document here, and I can go to Layer and choose New Pattern Layer. We will be prompted for the dimensions. Let's choose 256 by 256 pixels. You don't have to maintain a square aspect ratio, so you could make the width or height longer if you wanted to. Once we've clicked OK, we'll see a new pattern layer on our Layers panel here. Now, if I choose a tool to paint with, such as the paintbrush tool, we will now see the bounds in the middle. But we can actually paint anywhere, because the pattern is being repeated across the document in real time. For example, I could just zoom in, increase my brush width, and just stamp a round brush stroke into the pattern bounds, which is then repeated. So once we have the pattern contents, we can transform and manipulate the layer. I'll switch to the Move tool using V on the keyboard, and I can now scale, reposition, rotate, and even shear my pattern layer. When scaling the pattern, we can also change the resampling method on the context toolbar. Bilinear will produce a nice soft edge. Nearest neighbour will look sharper but also coarser. And anti-aliased nearest neighbour will provide a balance between the two methods. You can also use the Erase brush tool here to remove content from your pattern layer. Don't forget to experiment with different brushes as well. So I'll just delete this pattern layer, create a new one that is slightly larger. I'll get my paintbrush tool again, just zoom out slightly, and I'll go to the Brushes panel, go to the Engraving category, and I can choose the Textured Rake brush here. And what I could do with this is just increase the brush width and overlap the pattern layer boundaries for an interesting effect. I can always just quickly undo using Command Z on Mac or Control Z on Windows and do another brush stroke. Now you can clip a pattern layer into the bounds of another layer. For example, if I get the rectangle tool here, just turn on snapping so that I can snap to the edges of my document here and just draw out a rectangle. I can click drag this pattern layer and offer it to the rectangle, just keeping to the right here, like so. Then once I release the mouse button, it clips the pattern layer into the rectangle. And of course, we can still use the Move tool, so that's V, to scale that pattern and perhaps rotate it as well. But if we wanted to scale the rectangle, just be sure to enable Lock Children on the context toolbar here, so that we don't inadvertently end up scaling the pattern layer as well. So using this approach, you can quickly mock up patterns for compositions whilst being able to easily transform the patterns themselves if required. So I can hold Command on Mac, Control on Windows to select both pattern layers at the same time and just freely manipulate them how I wish. Now, although patterns are raster based, we can use vector elements initially to help create the pattern. Bear in mind, however, that this is not a solution for vector patterns, but is rather just a quick way of achieving certain shapes or paths for your raster patterns. Let's start from scratch and create a new pattern layer again. This time we'll give it a width and height of 1024 pixels. And in this video, I've already enabled it, but it really does help to use snapping when doing this. So I'll go to my quick shapes here, just long click to get to the cog tool Then I'll just offer my cursor to the middle here so you can see it snaps nicely. And we'll draw out a cog, so I'll hold Command on Mac, Control on Windows, to draw around the center point, and then Shift to constrain the aspect ratio. Now across on the color panel, we can give this a faint teal color. So let's just move these sliders like so until we get the color we're after. Or we could even use the gradient tool here. Draw out a gradient, change the type to radial, and then change this black stop to a brighter teal color. Then just select the other node, hold Shift and darken that slightly. Now, because we've effectively created a new layer, it's not part of the pattern layer. We just need to merge this down. So we can either use Layer, Merge Down, or we could use the shortcut, which is Command E on Mac, Control E on Windows. The cog is now part of the pattern layer. So once again, we can use V to get to the Move tool and manipulate the layer. So perhaps scale it down, rotate it, and then if we wanted to, we could clip it into other vector elements or even mask it. Now, you may have noticed on the layer menu, there is another option, New Pattern Layer from Selection. We can use this to create patterns from existing pixel layers. So here's an example. We have a floor plan here, which we might want to add a floor texture to. Now, I'm just going to go out to my File Explorer and open up this wood texture. Now, it's better to open it as a separate document to avoid any scaling issues. So to do that, rather than placing it over the document, we can offer this to the interface, then release the mouse button. So now we can just use Layer, New Pattern Layer from Selection. Then we can copy and paste this pattern layer. So let's use Command C on Mac, Control C on Windows. Go back to our floor plan, Command V on Mac, Control V on Windows to paste. V for the Move tool and just scale this down, like so. But now we need to mask it to specific areas of the floor plan. So let's temporarily hide the pattern layer and select this pixel layer here, which is the floor plan. So the easiest way to achieve this is by using the Flood Select tool. Let's just single click over the floor area here to create our initial selection. Then we need to select the bedroom floor as well. So to add to our existing selection, we would hold Control on Mac, and on Windows, you would actually hold down the right mouse button and then left click. So now we can select the pattern layer, show it again, and add a mask layer based on that selection that we've got. Then I can just deselect to get rid of the marquee, so Command D on Mac, Control D on Windows. Now, if we want to manipulate the pattern, we can do so using V for the Move tool, select that pattern. But again, like with the previous example, don't forget to choose Lock Children first, and that will keep the mask layer in place whilst you manipulate the pattern layer. So we might rotate this pattern and perhaps scale it slightly. And don't forget that we can still paint onto this pattern layer as well. So I could get the paintbrush tool, for example, go across to the brushes panel, go to the textures category, and find a suitable grunge pattern. Just increase my brush width, perhaps rotate it slightly using the arrow keys. And then I want to change my opacity to something very low. So we can just do this quickly on the keyboard. For 10% opacity, for example, I can type 1. And there you can see we can just add a very fine layer of grunge to the pattern. And I can use H to select the View tool again, which gets rid of any construction elements and lets us see what that result looks like. So there we go, a quick guide on how to use pattern layers. Thank you for watching.